Hey guys, my name is AJ Gillespie, and I'm a sophomore at Grove City Christian School, located in Columbus, Ohio. So for my final project in Bible class, we were given the task to take a little section from the Sermon on the Mount, and I'll get into a little bit of detail on what that is in a little bit. But we had to take a section from the Sermon on the Mount and kind of interpret it, give this big analysis on it, and then we just had to do some sort of project over it. Our teacher gave us the options to do anything along the lines of a music video or a blog or a board game or just, you guys know what I'm talking about. And I decided to just kind of talk. I don't know, give a little bit of a message in a sense. But pretty much the Sermon on the Mount, just in like kind of a brief summary, was the biggest sermon that Jesus ever gave during his ministry. It happened in the second of 3 years of his ministry, so about halfway through his ministry is when this happened. And the Sermon on the Mount took place right like on this mount next to the Sea of Galilee. So there's the Sea of Galilee. Jesus was standing on top of it, speaking to all these people out below him. The people that he was speaking to were Jews who were in the time period held captive by Roman soldiers, the Roman Empire. So he was speaking to not the best, like the people who he was speaking to weren't in the best they've ever been before. It wasn't like he was speaking to like the top notch or whatever. He was speaking to some pretty broken, pretty devastated people. So, like I was saying, my Bible teacher kind of went through and divvied the Sermon of the Mount up into sections based on like different things that Jesus talked about. And the section that I was assigned for this project is Matthew 6:24. And I'm going to read that for you guys right now. So Matthew 6:24 says, "No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will despise one and be devoted to the other. You cannot serve both God and be enslaved to money." So, the way I kind of view the Bible is that there's three kinds of verses. There's one, verses that enhance the plot of the Bible. They tell you about God or about Jesus or about a historical story or something that happened, but they don't really make you feel a certain way. They just kind of give you knowledge, give you information. The second kind of verse is a verse that makes you feel really good about yourself. You know, the Philippians 4:13, "I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength." Like the kind of verses that people put on their Instagram bios and do stuff with because they make people feel good. They give you hope. They give you joy. And then there's the third kind of verse, and I feel like a lot of times people try and overlook this kind of verse. And this is the kind of verse that makes you question the way you live your life. It's not fun to read. It's not easy to read because it puts you to the test almost. You know, it makes you make a decision. It makes you give stuff up. It makes you do stuff that you might not want to do or not do things that you might want to do. And these are the verses that honestly are the most crucial. Don't get me wrong, the verses of hope and joy are incredibly important, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about them, but what I'm saying is we cannot overlook this third kind of verse. And this verse, Matthew 6:24, is one of that third kind of verses. It's not easy to read. It's actually kind of confusing when you read it. Like, when I was assigned this, I was like, oh shoot, this is going to be really hard to do a project about because it's a really confusing verse. So I'm going to read it again to you guys. It says, "No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and be enslaved to money." So when it says no one can serve two masters, that's fairly self-explanatory. You know, I can't serve two different people at the same time. That makes sense, you know. But then it says, "For you will hate one and you will love the other." Now, just for the sake of me trying to get a message across to you guys. I want to take the word money out of that verse. And I want you to put in whatever it is that you are enslaved to. You know? It's the very last part of that verse. It says you cannot serve both God and be enslaved to money. Take out money and put in whatever it is that you are enslaved to. Maybe you're enslaved to your friends. Maybe you're enslaved to your sports. Maybe you're enslaved to your grades. Maybe you are enslaved to money or your things and your possessions. Maybe you are enslaved to drugs or alcohol or sex or whatever in the world it might be. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to those things. Back a little higher up in the verse, it says, "For you will hate one and love the other, and you will be devoted to one and despise of the other." So does this mean that if I love God, I have to hate all those things? If I love God, I have to hate my friends. I have to hate my stuff. I have to hate my sports, my school. I have to hate all that stuff? Does it mean that if I want to be devoted to God, I have to despise of those things? I don't think that's what it's trying to say. Because if it were, that would make my life and your life a lot different, because we would pretty much have to hate everything and only devote ourselves to God. And I don't think that's what God wants us to do. What I think that this verse is trying to say is that we have to choose God every time. And I think what it's also trying to say is the flip side, where if we devote ourselves to our friends, and we devote ourselves to our sports and our school and our money and those drugs and alcohol and sex and all those things that we've talked about, if we enslave ourselves to those things and we devote ourselves to those things, then maybe our hearts will slowly start to despise God. I went through a time in my life when I had no intention of despising God, but I started to kind of let some of those things take control of my heart. I started to serve Him a little bit. They became my masters, you know? I would think about girls the wrong way. You know, I would take my stuff, my money way too seriously, and I held way too much identity in my things. And, you know, I was tempted to do drugs. I was tempted to drink. And, you know, I was starting to devote myself more and more to those things. I was devoting myself to my friends a lot. I was devoting myself to, you know, trying to get a girl. I was devoting myself to girls a lot. And slowly, my heart started to despise God. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I started to realize, or at least think that I was realizing, that I didn't need God. That I was despising of Him, like I was devoting myself to these things, and that led to me despising God. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to blank. You can't do it. It's not saying that for us to be devoted to God, we have to completely hate all these other things. But what it's saying is that if we're going to be devoted to God, we have to be devoted to God. If we want to love God, we have to love God. I think a big part of this is the way that we look at the things that we do. If we are constantly thinking about the wrong thing, when I was in that kind of time period in my life that I was telling you guys about a few minutes ago, when I was trying to get out of that, I was doing everything I could to not do the wrong thing. I was doing everything that I could to not cuss, or to not look at girls the wrong way, or to not do this and not do that. But my mind was still wrapped around the wrong thing. I was still devoting myself to those wrong things. Even though I was trying to stop doing them, my mind was still wrapped around them. So my mindset was completely devoted to being enslaved to these masters, these things that were taking control of me. And it wasn't until I realized that I needed to devote myself to God for my heart to despise those things that I actually could get out of that slump. So it's not saying that for you to devote yourself to God, you have to make the conscious decision to hate everything else in the world. It's saying that when you devote yourself to God, you realize that nothing else in this world has any value. And you realize that devoting yourself to God means you have to give some stuff up. You have to make some sacrifices. Because you cannot serve God while you're enslaved. Enslaved to whatever it is that you're enslaved to, you can't do it. You just can't do it. Right here I have a handcuff. And if I put myself in these handcuffs, in these chains, I'm enslaved to this. I can't get out. If God is this side of the screen right over here, and I need to get to it so I can serve God, I can't do it while I'm enslaved. So what do? I take the key, I take God, and I say, you know what, God? I'm going to devote myself to you. I'm going to give up these things. I'm going to stop devoting myself to these masters. I'm going to take the key. I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to set myself free. And I'm over here now. And in the process of that, you naturally start to despise those things. So instead of trying to not do the wrong thing, just try and chase after God. It's really that simple. Because God does this miraculous thing in our hearts when we decide to devote ourselves to Him, where He takes temptation away from us. He takes stuff away from us. He takes the need and the want and the desire for these bad things. He takes them away from us. So that way our hearts learn to despise of them. Whatever it is in your life, guys, whatever it is in your life that you serve, whether you're like me, where you serve your friends more than anything, and you do so much to please them and make them happy, so that way they'll like you and they'll be your friend. You serve them. You're enslaved to them. Maybe it's drugs or alcohol or sex, and you just love it and you are enslaved to it. And just that wild partying lifestyle. And it chains you down and you're enslaved to it. Maybe it is money. Maybe it is your stuff. Maybe you can't go anywhere without buying $100 worth of clothes, and you can't, like, you care about your car more than you care about anything, and your stuff means so much to you. Whatever it is that holds you down, because I don't know, it's different for every single person watching this video, but whatever it is that holds you down, I absolutely promise you that if you devote yourself to God, break that chain, cut that chain off and start chasing God, I promise you, it will be the most important decision that you've ever made in your life. I'm going to read the verse one more time, and this time I think we can grasp it a little bit better. It says, "No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money, or drugs, or sex, or your friends, or sports, or school, or anything else. If you're enslaved, you can't serve." So in closing, all I have to say is that you need to make a conscious decision to serve God, to break that chain, and to devote yourself to the right thing. Because honestly, if you're trying to serve two masters, you're really serving neither of them. Because if you're given part of yourself over here and part of yourself over there, you're not really devoting yourself to either. So it makes both kind of pointless. If you're devoting yourself to God and also to sex, it doesn't make sense. Because it can't happen cohesive, like they can't happen at the same time together. So what I'm going to encourage you guys with today is to take that step, to make that decision, to break the chain, and to move forward, and to devote yourself to God. And, just kind of see what happens. It's a journey, and sucky stuff is going to happen to you, but I promise you guys that doing it with Him on your side and doing it with the common goal of devoting yourself to Him and chasing after Him makes everything in this world so much easier. So pretty much all I have to say is to devote yourself. Go out there and be the difference, be the change that you want to see. Because you cannot serve two masters. No matter how long you've been trying to do it, you cannot do it. You cannot serve two masters. And that is what Jesus is trying to say to us on the Sermon on the Mount. When he literally said those words to thousands of people. He said, you can't serve two masters. If it weren't a real important issue, then God wouldn't have said it to that many people and that big of a platform, So go out there, devote yourself, and change the world, because nothing's holding you back anymore. This chain right here, it's broken. I am broken. I broke this chain. So now there's nothing holding me back anymore. So why not? Why not go chase God? Why not go devote yourself to God?